Who wants a pot of coffee? I just made coffee. You want a cup of coffee? Sure, there you go. Who wants coffee? Anybody else want coffee? Who wants coffee?
And now it's time for the man with the caffeine, the new tropics for the brain. It's Coffee with Mike. Hang in, hang tight, grab your cup, and let's get this thing started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Java Chat. This is Coffee with Mike, and today I have the pleasure of sitting with David Hennessey. Let me make this clear. It's not that Hennessy, although that would be cool, but it's a different Hennessy. And actually, this is going to be really interesting when you hear his story. I believe I'm going to let him share it for the most part, but this is an interesting story and an interesting gentleman. David, thank you for joining us on Java Chat.
My pleasure, Michael. Yes, my life is a bit diverse, to say the least.
Yeah, we were just talking about that a little bit on the pre-show, and David comes from a very interesting background. He's been to numerous places on this planet. He currently resides in France, south of France, as it were, but his story and where he's gotten to where he's at today is quite interesting. Give us a little background on yourself, my friend. Share with us who you are and where you're from.
Yes, well, for those people who are not familiar at all with me, I was born in Dublin, Ireland, and I don't have a very strong Irish accent right now, but if I was in Ireland, it comes right back, which is just absolutely amazing. When my knowledge and awareness of how our brain works and how our mind works, it's like we make a shift, a mental shift. Even the English language that I use in Ireland changes. The phrases, the swear words.
Oh, yeah.
Close that, but like there's a different version. And then I moved from Ireland to Canada and spent another chunk of my life. And now I currently live, as you mentioned there, Michael, in the south of France. And I really appreciate everybody that's listening. So that's where I've spent many, many years of my life in each of those countries. And I've also traveled to, I think it's 23 different countries. So everything from places like Romania, to Jordan, to Egypt, to northern Pakistan, which is unusual for people to visit. And I've spent time in the northern Pakistan area, which is the Himalayas. I was hiking in the mountains there. So not your average countries, average places.
Oh.
And in those cases, I was traveling as a hardened backpacker. So carrying all my own stuff and traveling, really feeling the local culture and experiencing what you don't see in the media. And that's something that I find very interesting.
That's huge. When you can go out, and I have other friends that say the more you travel, the more you become aware of the rest of the world. It's not always just the little window that we see on a daily basis. So
for sure.
Yeah. So you currently, what do you currently do now?
Okay, the focus of my work is really giving people the core principles of health and wellness. I developed a program back in 1999, which I called the W.O.N.D.E.R technique, and it's been evolving ever since then. And in fact, as well as evolving, I like to say, crystallizing the ideas, like take a piece of coal and making it into a diamond by being more assured and confident of the information I'm sharing. And one of the examples would be when I started in 1999, the very first event that I did was actually in a high school, 160 students, all adolescents, which is a great test because most of my work is being with people directly in person, doing conference work, which a lot of people, when they work in the coaching industry, they're usually one-on-one or maybe online nowadays. But my experience has been directly with people. That did change in the last year or so, which those people listening are aware of what happened in the world. So it brought me to meet yourself, Michael, and having the honor to be on your show. So, because I'd never done podcasts before, and I hadn't really touched, doing online work. So that really was a nice experience. It's been very positive. Where my work is mostly the W.O.N.D.E.R technique, to go back to what I was mentioning there, 20 years ago, the importance of sleep, for example, people knew about it, they talked about it, but nobody was really embracing it and really understanding it. And all the different parts of the W.O.N.D.E.R technique touches on different core principles of our health and well-being, whether it's exercise, whether it's our state of mind, whether it's nutrition, which I like to call delicious, nutritious food, because you're looking at the idea that it's not just food that you know that's good for you, but that food that's actually enjoyable for you to eat. Because I do believe that there's a very important impact on how we approach, for example, foods by our state of mind and how we approach it. If a person, says I'm going on a diet, but they feel like they're being coerced into it or they have to do it, or if a person's doing a physical exercise they don't really enjoy because someone said they should do it, or for example, their friends are all runners, but they don't like running, it just sets up kind of a barrier inside our mind. And I
Sure.
believe that for myself, like I love to hike, and recently I got into rock climbing, and I really love doing rock climbing. And nobody has to convince me to go out and do these activities. The side effect of these activities is my physical well-being, but it's not the first pathway. So I remind people through the Wonder technique at a very fundamental basis to find things that they really love to do and to embrace them as different parts of their lives, and recognizing that we're all in a constant process of personal development. And the more we develop ourselves, the more we are fulfilled in all areas of our lives. And I believe all of it, as I like to say, is holistic. It's all interconnected. If you are off-centered because of your diet, because of your lack of exercise, because of your lack of hydration, your lack of sleep, it is very difficult to be centered in relationships. Those people, your children, your family, your work colleagues, how can you be? And people sometimes, life is challenging, and I recognize that, but we need to remember always the fundamentals as we move forward. We need to have a strong foundation. And my long-term goal is to give those principles to everybody so they don't have to focus on the details. They can just explore their life as they want it to be.
There had to be one hell of an epiphany in the midst of all of this, that this popped up, this Wonder technique. How did you come about designing this?
Yes. In fact, I believe, well, I know where originally the Wonder technique started was in the 90s, when originally my mom had cancer. She had 2 bouts of cancer. And during the time when she had the cancer, I was working with her to help simplify the process of her understanding the medical opinion she was getting, whether it was a nutritionist, a naturopath, doctor. Full disclosure, I always say this, I wasn't the only person around, but I was a person who was always been massively curious. And when I spent the time with my mom, and she was, when somebody's going through a medical crisis, they're not thinking as clearly. They don't have, they're stressed out. The stress messes with our decision-making capacity. I remind people, Michael, that I call resilience in advance. The tools that you need to have in your life in difficult situations, you need to learn them before you hit that situation. You need to buy a fire extinguisher before you ever have a fire. Hopefully you don't have one in your home. You need jumper cables in your car before the battery. But, we need to take care of our health and well-being before we hit a crisis. And I've hit physical crisis in my life. Like one time I fell in a rock climbing accident, and what happened, I wasn't able to walk for 6 months, but the tools I used going through that experience were tools I'd learned ahead of time. So it's really, really hard in a life experience to learn things right when we're in the midst of it, to change everything. So to go back to when my mom started to recover from cancer, I started to look at my own health and well-being and tried to think about, how can I make this simple, what I've learned? I mean, I went through university in psychology too, but I never knew how to integrate things. But I knew one thing: when I was in university, I created a lot of acronyms and images to help me remember things. Simple tools. Like when we know of different ways, images and things, we can say, how can I remember stuff? Because we have lots of stuff going on. So I started to create images and acronyms and log ideas and read the scientific journals, try and simplify them, understand better about health and well-being. Now I say health and well-being, but it's more than that, because when I talk about personal development, it touches all the different domains, but health and well-being is underneath all of these areas. And so I started to create a system that the first time I tested it out was in a public situation, where then I realized people, they really loved what I was sharing, but I was sharing it too complex. So then I started to distill everything down into like the Wonder technique, which is a teaching acronym that I use. And then inside of that, there's more and more acronyms. And for example, I created recently a program called How to Find and Follow Your Purpose. And inside of that program, the words purpose is an acronym. And I talk about, like in that program, give an example, those people listening, when you make an agreement with yourself, you make a pact, okay? It's an agreement with yourself, right? And that's your pact is an acronym for your purpose, you keep avoidance, commitment, and tools. So I'm empowering people that are listening to take information that they can easily remember because it's attached to something. Like when I learned the French language, it wasn't people randomly giving me words and then I was just kind of speaking the language. I started it by attaching French words to English words I already knew. And I learn French language better when it's on a subject matter, surprise, surprise, that is of interest to me, right? We learn about things that we have a passion for. So I had a reason to remember the information. So my accent in French is not great, but if I said to somebody, somebody said to me car in English and I said voiture en français, I could attach the two words together. So I started to build a vocabulary that way. And from my knowledge of health and well-being, I started to build systems to make it easier for me to remember and what became systems for other people over time to adapt. Everywhere from the youngest 6 years of age, because I worked in a school in British Columbia with children with cognitive challenges. That's what they call it. And I think these children were amazing. And that group was between 6 and 16 years of age. And I remember a lady that was at one workshop and she proudly put up her hand and said, I'm 88. So that's how I know the oldest person that was present. But that it's not like people say, marketing, you should have a niche group. I go against that because I believe that the principles apply to everybody.
So there are certain industries or certain industries where the avatar tenet does not apply. Mm-hmm. And if you're in coaching and you're doing certain things, and I've met numerous coaches, one of the biggest ones that I remember was Brendan Bouchard.
Yes.
Who everybody knows. He's a high performance coach. He does all of his. I was at one of his seminars.
Yes.
He specifically said, as a high performance coach, you don't have an avatar because you have no idea who needs what you have until you actually sit down and talk with them.
Yes.
And he breaks that same mold too. So for me, I'm. As much as marketing it does have that as one of the points that if you're in a certain niche, obviously you're going to have a target market. But when it comes to health and wellness, I just don't see that unless you want to super specialize in certain things. And in your case, what I'm hearing is honestly the 101 of life and living, which
Yes.
is being aware of your health and the whole thing around, learning before you get there. You don't go out on a hike without trying to figure out what that hike's like, seeing who else has already been on that hike. I mean, unless you're a trail cutter, that's different. But if you're going backpacking around, the Alps, you don't want to take the wrong trail and end up someplace and you're still in shorts and you're up on the mountaintops. It's not exactly a smart idea to go without thinking first, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, killer. So you've developed this W.O.N.D.E.R technique.
Yes.
It's obviously worked because you've been using it and it has evolved. How has it evolved and what's it been turning into?
Okay, it's a great question. It originally started out just at the 6 core principles of the W.O.N.D.E.R technique. And now what it has evolved is that I've taken pieces of it and expanded it more. And there's crossover between them. For example, in the last year, I developed a number of mini courses, and there's 10 of them right now. There will be more. One of them is, as I mentioned already, is how to find and follow your purpose. Another one is how to sleep well and wake up energized. Another one is how to focus and concentrate your mind so you can achieve your goals. So they're all for people who say, well, I want to focus on that area. And what I do is I draw from the pool of my experience and I bring it into that area because in that way, as you mentioned, the word like an avatar, it might be something that somebody wants to focus on, but there's a ripple effect in everything because when you sleep well and wake up energized, when you practice the core principles of getting better sleep, it impacts everything. It impacts your ability to focus. It impacts your ability to make better choices. When people are trying to work on their, what am I going to do in my life? How am I going to manage things? How can I improve my relationships? All of these things come together. So if somebody was to do every single one of the programs I have, they will see a natural crossover because, as I mentioned before, it's very holistic. So that has been the evolution that I've split things up, but I still keep them connected. And I keep an eye on them happily. I smile when I listen to other people's research and podcasts when I see reaffirmation of things that I've learned years ago. And that keeps on getting piled on because I've often wondered, and I'm happy to take criticism. And my best friends, I always say, listen, if I say something crazy, tell me. I want to know. I want to be able to, check. Am I saying, does this make any sense? Like, stop me. And it always comes back, Michael, to fundamental things. Like I was on a gentleman's podcast and he said to me about, what is a core principle of relationships? And I said, well, sitting down and actually taking the time to listen to somebody, sounds so obvious, and not interrupting and not formulating questions while you're listening to them. This is mind control, okay? Because most people,
Yep.
and I know too, I'm always thinking, oh, how can I answer that? But in fact, to really hear the person, I need to shut everything down. And you know what, the example he actually gave to me, Michael, was I had a challenge with somebody and I don't know how to resolve it. And I said to him, well, did this happen this morning or this afternoon? Because of the time change, I was in France, of course, it's evening time. And he said, no, this happened a couple of weeks ago. And I paused and I was thinking, okay, so a lot of time has passed since the event happened.
Yeah.
And he wanted to know, what can I say to that person? And I said, I don't know if there's anything you can say to them, but what you can go to them and say, how do you feel about what happened? And get them to speak.
Yeah.
Now that sounds very basic and simple, but it's extraordinarily powerful. Those
It's also really contradictory to natural tendencies, because humans love to respond rather than to listen. It's we see it everywhere. As an example, and this is kind of off the side, but there's a comedian that used to have that as part of his act. That isn't it funny how when you're in a group of people and somebody's telling a story, and the only thing you can think about is, hurry up and finish your story, I want to share mine. And this is a human tendency. I want to share. But as you've mentioned, listening without thinking allows for a better experience for you to understand what that human experienced, because it may not be a download. It may just be a sharing of an experience. There's a nugget in everything.
Yes.
But it takes a second to actually hear it before you'll ever get that nugget. Otherwise, you're just trying to dump your load on everybody too. And that's kind of inconsiderate, putting it nicely.
Yeah.
The skill of listening is something that, and this is another thing that and here I go, look at me. It triggered something else too. Yeah, it triggered something else in my head too, with regards to listening skills. Humans are very self-centric.
Okay.
To the point that they forget what it means to listen, and albeit a basic rule of life is listen first. There's an 18-year-old every day being just making 19. There's a 19 making 20. There's a 20 making 21, and this is every day. And I can pretty much guarantee every day a new bit of wisdom is opened up when somebody goes, oh, maybe I should have listened better. Or maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I should have waited. Maybe I shouldn't have waited. Isn't it amazing that humankind is consistently learning, and that the very things that you're teaching, they've been taught, but they were never passed down? Isn't that weird?
It's very interesting how you've looked at it. And for those people listening, it takes mental energy to do this. It's not easy. There's multiple areas in my life that I have my own form of meditation. I'll give you an example in a second as to how I train my mind, because they might be wondering, when you're talking, you were sharing there, Michael, I'm listening to your words as best I can so I can listen to you and not hear the chatter in my mind. That's one way to work on it. And one of my examples is that when I rock climb, that's my meditation, because if my mind is wandering, if I'm not paying attention, I'm going to fall. And I'm talking about, I've only been rock climbing for about 1.5 years, but when you're, what would it be, 35 meters, about 105 feet up, and you're pinning in, you're climbing on French, it's en tête, so you're lead climbing. Yes, you may not fall that far, but far could be 10 feet, but it's enough to bang you up. Or it could be 30 feet if the pin doesn't work or something. But you need to be really in that experience. And the more I control my mind, because for those people listening, they might think, oh, that's easy for David. But honestly, I was afraid of heights. I used to be afraid of heights. And I've worked through that process by controlling my mind and controlling the chatter. So every time I rock climb, I'm working more on that. But that pivots off into my own life. My ability to control my mind allows me, I hope, let my friends and those around me be a better judge than I am of myself, my capacity to listen and to focus more in many different parts of my life.
That's huge.
So that's what everything I see. Everything is interconnected.
Oh yeah, I agree. That just that alone, just being able to, because I'm acrophobic,
Okay.
and at 215 pounds, if I fall 10 feet, I'm going to pull that second pin out.
Okay.
Might not go so well for me as it might for you.
Yes.
But you make a killer point when you've worked through the challenges of the mind, because our mind is protective. It's always going to do what it can to protect our being. Climbing up that 105 foot or 105 meter rock is not natural, not to the human mind. Why in the world would you not just go take the stairs?
Yeah, and I'm not a bird.
Yeah, exactly. If we were meant to fly, we would have wings. And here we
Yes.
have these huge, how many tons of metal and plastic flying through the air at amazing speeds.
Yes.
It takes, as you mentioned, a training of the mind to go beyond what we think our limits are. I still don't think enough of humanity understands just exactly how strong and powerful our minds are. We're still not there yet. We're getting there. There's some awakenings happening.
Yes.
And the more we begin to realize what we are capable of, and that the thoughts that we manifest can do anything, both for ourselves and our outside world. If we can get to that kind of consciousness, I think a lot of the issues this planet is having will begin to wane, if you will, start going away. At least that's my hope. I don't know if that's what you're seeing. I don't know if that's what you're coaching, but that's my hope.
I want to say that there's a lot of wisdom in what you just said, Michael, because when we believe things are possible, as human beings, we're really good at limiting ourselves. We say, I'm not able to do that. But when you look at nature, you don't see the wind say, I can't blow harder. You don't see the water say, I can't go further.
Yep.
You don't see the sun say, I can't burn brighter. But as humans, we pull ourselves back. And yet I have some incredible experiences in my own life, because as one of my good friends, she always says to me, David, you are the wonder technique. It's not just you're sharing it. I practice what I share. And I keep on, there's work involved. There's less work over time because I've developed habits, and those habits come into place. We can have good habits, we can have bad habits, and do I have the commitment? I love what Ken Blanchard wrote in the 1 Minute Manager. I think it was 1986 when I read it. And he wrote in the book about some people are interested and some people are committed. Are you interested in learning about personal development, or are you committed to it? Well, I'm committed to it. And I'm committed to it on the basis of being the best example I can be of myself, the same way to be the best example I can be to my children. But my job is, my responsibility as a human being is to do the best that I can do. And that removes me as a problem in the world. And everybody has the capacity to do incredible things. And my recognition from that is not only from work and the impact I've seen from my work on other people's lives and other people's work that has impacted other people, but that's for myself. For example, in 2018, I mentioned a little bit earlier that I'd been in a rock climbing accident. This was 2014. And after I recovered and I was able to walk again, I eventually got back into hiking. And then a friend of mine called me, I remember this so very clearly, March the 7th, 2018, he called me and said, David, I'm thinking about doing a marathon. And I went, really? And I went like, I don't run. And I said, because I hike, I don't run. It's a completely different thing.
Oh yeah.
And he said, are you interested? And I said, well, tell me more. So I was willing to listen. And he said, well, it's in Greece where the original marathon, from Marathon to Athens, and you end in the Olympic Stadium. And I said to him, as wild as I am, I said, I'm in. And I was like, but it was 6 months later, it was November the 11th, the same year, and I never ran. And the first time I went out, then actually it was the next day, I ran, and I ran, I think 1.7 kilometers. So it was like a mile. I was like, this is not easy. What's going on? But what I did here, and this is valuable, hopefully for the listeners to see, I did a very different form of training for a marathon. I used what I call the compounding effect. I accumulated distance over time, more and more and more, to the fact that, okay, pardon me, I remember the numbers easier in kilometers because I was training against kilometers, but we can revise it. It's 42 and a half roughly in kilometers a marathon. Normally they say don't do more than 32 kilometers before it. And I did 36 before. Why? Because psychologically I thought on the day, if I've got to run 10 kilometers and more, which is roughly 25% more. So if you did 18 miles instead of 26, you're thinking that's a long distance to finish. But if I just had in my mind, I just got to do an extra 6, that sounds achievable. But here's what I wanted to share, Michael. 3 weeks before, it was in the beginning of October, I woke up one morning, and not because of running. I don't know, you know, when you sleep and sometimes you get a kink in your neck. I woke up and I had my knee was hurting, my right knee was hurting. And I was like, oh my God, I've got 3 weeks left. Normally, this is when you finish up most of your training. And I had the decision to make. Do I start running again on my knee? Or do I stop training now, go to Athens and do the run? So what I decided to do was walk, move around, but not run anymore. Keep the level of training I had. But every single day, at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, I visualized myself running. I looked online and saw maps of the route, the finish line and everything. And I literally, like high-level athletes do, I trained my mind to believe it was possible. And it was quite hilarious. So on the day when I got there and started to run, I went with 3 other friends. That was when I found out that part of the marathon in going from Marathon to Athens is uphill. I trained on flat ground. I didn't even know that. And I'm really grateful that one of my friends said to me, you should carry a hat, because I'd always trained early in the morning so I wouldn't get the sun. Because being Irish, I'm not the person who wants lots of sunshine. And I speak for myself, not all Irish people. But so it was like I had the hat and I carried a water bottle, and then another sideball, kind of digression, but it was important. One of the things I learned about my training is that if I fasted a little bit before the marathon, before my training, I had way more energy because my body was in what's called an anabolic state, building energy, as against a catabolic state, breaking stuff down. That was a phenomenal experience for me to recognize. And that opened up another area of my life where I realized later on, and this is 2018, now be 2021, is that how my body can function by paying attention not only to something that I learned in school, because I also did training in nutrition, and that was about the quality of food and the quantity of food, but the timing of when I eat. And that's something that when I started the W.O.N.D.E.R technique 20 years ago, I had no awareness of the importance of the timing. I had awareness of the quality and quantity. So this is something I brought in, but for the marathon, I completed it. I was able to continue walking after the marathon, as against seeing people that were collapsing on the ground, because my goal was I would stop. Even if I was 10 kilometers before the end, Michael, if I felt physically I was going to hurt myself. My goal was to complete it without any injury, no back pain, no knee pain. And I'm very, very happy that I did.
That is amazing. If anybody hasn't if you don't know the original story of marathon, go learn it. You'll have a really good idea of what David had to face with regards to that whole run, and kudos for doing that, brother. That's not easy. I love the way you approached it though too, just 25% more. Honestly, in any venture, whether that's physical, mental, entrepreneurial, because we've got a lot of entrepreneurs. It's like, guys, if you're looking at doing a business and you know it's going to take just another 25% beyond what you've already been putting in, and you've been doing this whole time, it's not that much more. Honestly, it's easier humans can take things in chunks. It's easier to bite it off in smaller bites, right? How to eat an elephant. So the idea of this is what David did was he took it and said, okay, I've already got this part. Just one more chunk. And I got this. And he did, he got it. I think that's a huge point that most people forget, because a lot of times the whole overwhelm thing happens still quite often to this day, no matter what age we're at. And I think it's a better way to frame anything that seems overwhelming. Had that happen to me yesterday with a different situation. And when I looked at it, I was like, well, I really can't do anything about it right now. The moment I know what is there, I'll be able to deal with it at that time. And it still hasn't availed itself. So I'm just kind of sitting in the back, hanging out, waiting. Guys, we're going to take a short, quick 30-second break. And when we come back, we're going to go digging into, the why. Okay. That's always the fun part. So we'll be back in 30. And we're back here at Java Chat, Coffee with Mike, hanging out with David Hennessey. We were talking a little bit about the W.O.N.D.E.R technique and some of the experiences that he's had in his past moving to today. We always like to find out what's the why. Why do people do what they do? And, aside of the family, which is always a wonderful reason why, there had to have been other things that inspired. Did you have children when you first came up with the W.O.N.D.E.R technique, or was that just something
No,
So this started as a true inspiration. But what started that? I mean, what really flicked that light?
It goes way back because I've always been immensely curious about how things work. Actually, as a young teenager, when I was in Canada, I took apart engines and built cars, what we would call hot rods. People in Europe don't necessarily know them. I built small block Chevy engines and things like that. So
love it.
I loved it. I don't want to digress and start talking about Holley carburetors and stuff, but I worked on those sort of things, and I loved taking things apart and figuring out how things worked. And it happened to when I got out of high school and I got into university. And I was thinking about becoming, well, actually, people were saying you should maybe go into engineering because you're really good on mechanical stuff. And I ended up changing in a chemistry class, to a psychology class. And I fell in love with the complexity of the human mind and wondering, how could I take this incredible information that we know, and this is, of course, a long time ago when I started, over 20 years ago, and bring it into everyday life. Because there's a lot of things, for example, when you hear Michael Gladwell, some of his bestsellers, some great books that he's brought out, he talks about information that I studied in school 20 years ago. No disrespect to Michael at all, but the timeline between information that we study in the scientific world, by the time it gets to society, is very, very long. And yet some of those things can be life-changing and very, very simple things. But it's like, for example, you hear more and more people nowadays talking about the power of eating fruits and vegetables. When I first started, I looked at, okay, I'm looking at all these different phytonutrients, plant nutrients, or phytochemicals, which is the true name, the plant chemicals, how they work in the human body. Examples, beta carotene, lutein, all these different ones. How can I make it that science, which is really valuable, easier for people, even young people, to embrace in their lives? And I came up at the time when people started to talk about eating colorful meals. I wrote some articles about following the colors of the rainbow. So red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, and violet. And I had a little one there. What do all the colors of the rainbow condense into? White. So not to leave out the white foods, garlic, onions, etc. And said to people, why not, when you go shopping, instead of going to the grocer and saying, hey, what do you got with beta carotene inside it today? And then they look at you and go, I have no idea what you're even talking about. You just look for orange foods. Like, and when, you're looking for something, I heard there's somewhere, somebody said there's a particular fruit or vegetable that's really good for men, for their prostate. Tomatoes. Okay. So like, it's like you're looking for the color red, and they're expressing themselves as like nature expresses itself a certain way. So I started doing events with people and saying, okay, as part of the food thing, when you go shopping, think of the colors of the rainbow. That's simple. Now, there's plenty of other people that have embraced that idea and ran with that idea, but it's just an example of how a scientific information can be made simple to apply in everyday life. Because that's the burden, is moving things from where they exist in science. And when we don't pay attention to science, we don't learn a lot. Like I learned recently, the impact of GPS systems would not have been able to be discovered, and they're very valuable for us nowadays, unless Einstein had written the theory of relativity, understanding the impact of gravitation and how it changes orientation. So that's just an example of how science comes into everyday life. The idea of microwaves came from space studies, and so there's a lot of science that's extraordinarily valuable, and we've seen the movement of science over the last year and how things, when they really get focused on, we can see a massive difference. So, but the big thing is the transition, Michael. It's how to get it from A to B, and also to get it it's not stressful. I mean, how difficult it is for someone to say, think of the colors of the rainbow. Now, when you say just colorful, to me, that's not enough.
Mm.
That's a personal, like people think colorful, okay, I will just get colorful stuff. No, no, no. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, plus white kind of thing. And now I will say there's an interesting line here and people can relate to it. One of the plants that is very popular in nature is green colored plants. And
Of
white or
course.
green is the chlorophyll. And
Right.
what does chlorophyll do? It purifies our blood.
Yep.
And nature is saying, hey, there's lots of us here green. There's a purpose behind this. You definitely need to eat green foods. And what do we see coming out again and again in the science is the importance of different types of green foods.
Yep.
So I don't want to lean too much into the food stuff, but I've looked at that and I've looked for how can I bring this to the table for people so that they can adapt this in their life. So every part of the Wonder technique, whether it's about your state of mind, whether it's about exercise, whether it's about getting better rest, whether it's about improving your focus, I really, really try and make it so that it's very simple. Now, you asked me, this is supposed to be about where's my why? My why is to simplify things, to
Yeah.
make things as easy as possible
Yeah.
and make it so that people can just do it without concern and feel that they can easily look back at their day and say, okay, I did this, and build upon what they've done already.
Share an example of when you've seen somebody get that aha moment when you've done this for them.
Okay, the example, and I will do the one that pops right into my mind, was a lady, Mary, who came to one of my events, and she showed up second time. And before, actually, you know, as a business note, when you work as a professional speaker, a very smart thing to do is to greet the people that are coming to the event and say hello to them, because there's a couple of things happen. You build rapport,
Yeah.
you get to meet the people. Although that's my intention is to be friendly, it's just who I am. And you also ask questions and, you know, what's of interest to you? Why are you here? Because people are giving up their time to be present. Like yourself, Michael, you're giving me a piece of your life by giving me your time, by giving me this opportunity on your podcast. So to value your time, to value people listening, I'm trying to share as much as I can. Mary showed up at an event for the second time, and I kind of recognized her. I went up and I started chatting with her, and she said something which I thought was a big statement. She said to me, David, you changed my life. And I'm like, that's not possible. In my head, you know, in my mind, I was like, how could I have done this? And she said, well, because you finally convinced me about the value of drinking water, the importance of hydration, because during the seminar, you gave multiple reasons as to why I needed to hydrate my body. And I had never seen those reasons before. People had told me to drink water. They talked about the story, which is scientifically, I've never seen a study that proves, you know, 6 to 8 glasses of water a day. I'm of the belief system that it relates more to your body size, your activity, your altitude, not your attitude, but your altitude, like where you're in the air, air temperature and such. And she said, I embrace water. And ever since then, headaches that I had, full disclosure, I'm not a doctor. I'm not trying to pretend to be one, but she told me that the headaches that she used to have went away because she hydrated herself. Now, the most interesting part about this here, Mary was a nurse. That was her profession. So
Really?
I never made the assumption that
What?
I didn't know who was in the audience.
Sure,
Like
sure.
she was in a group actually of community association of people that were family services. So I had no idea who was in the audience, but they're all there because they want to bring information out to families.
Sure.
When she came to the first event, and the second event was another community association that had me come in and speak, and she showed up again. That was an aha moment that I saw for as an example to you, which is like, that's really good. And it was just,
That blows my mind. I
yeah.
mean, it's, an RN did
Yeah.
not really want to embrace. Okay, so
Okay,
I
I
live
can
in
give you
the
another
desert.
example that's even more recent, but it doesn't have the same impact. I met a
Right.
lady the other day in a pharmacy who was a nurse, and she told me that the people's response to COVID, this is date stamping the podcast, she says, and it's not related to the capacity for people to be impacted negatively by COVID is not related to the level of stress that they have in their life. And she told me this, and I was like, hang on a second here. You know, you're telling me that the suppression of our immune system, which is typically done by stress in their lives, is not going to make somebody more susceptible to a virus? And she's a nurse. So sometimes people that work in the medical industry, they're very, very wise, and I know plenty of people in the industry, but sometimes there's a disconnect between what makes sense, because we now know that stress impacts the power of our immune
Oh,
system.
absolutely.
So the fact that a nurse, right, 2021, this was this month, June, that she told me this when I was talking with her, because I was asking her about, you know, how she was dealing with the stress of people coming in. And she said, well, people get really sick and we have no idea why. And I said, do you ever look at the experience of their life
Well,
outside of,
telepathics don't.
yeah, I was
I,
surprised. I was
I
as surprised as you were there.
it's well, to me, it's because of where I live. It's not as much of a surprise as you might think, but there is that disconnect that people have forgotten. And in the allopathic world, it's still always symptom, fix the symptom, and eventually it'll go away. In the holistic sense, it's where's the symptom come from? Where's the
Yes.
point of origin? What is it? Is it stress? And I have friends that are naturopaths, homeopaths, and that's really the first questions they ask. What's going on in your life right now?
Yeah.
I did know a couple of DOs, the allopathic sides that went functional. Same story. They'll ask you, what's going on right now? What are you doing in life? Where are you working? How are you doing? And their patients, they tell me that their patients kind of look at them kind of, huh? Why would you want to know that? I'm feeling sick, doc. I was like, oh, yeah, I get it. But what's going on? We need to know how you got here. I mean, I think there's a lot more to learn with regards.
There is, Michael, and it's actually surprised me. I spoke to one gentleman who is a cancer surgeon in the US, and he told me that his job he's working on creating a business to help medical doctors manage their stress. He says they're the most burnt out. And when he told me this, I was like, darn, you're kidding me. I was like, 20 years ago, I heard about this when I started the W.O.N.D.E.R technique. I didn't think it was getting worse. I thought it was getting better. So I know that the world has got more challenging. There's a lot more impact. Whether people want to say it's because of social media, but there's a lot more things that are different from when I was younger. And I recognize that. And I think we really need to get back to fundamentals and build from there. And one of the fundamentals that I like to share with people, if I can just throw it out on the table here, is recognizing the importance of silence. Talking about just silence, like that's the part of the thing I mentioned to you when you were in conversation with somebody, being silent. A couple sitting together at a dinner table, not feeling the need to fill the space with conversation. And the analogy that I use is that when we listen to music, there's the music and there's space between the notes. If there was no space between the notes, it would just be noise. Mm-hmm. So you imagine that in life, there's cycles through all the areas. Conversation goes up and down, the sun goes up and down. There's all different cycles in our lives. We have an up cycle, a down cycle during the day, depending on our chronotype. There's lots of things, but we go through cycles, and the sounds and then the lack of sounds, we need the silence. And that silence actually gives us peace of mind.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's something that I had to learn. Having been in relationships, now being single, it's like I never took those moments. I was always looking for noise, rather than moments of silence where I could settle, because our minds love being busy.
Yes.
And I think that is profound. Just finding a moment of, some call it silence, some call it stillness, that place of calm, so that our heads can get back into the game, if you will. That's huge, man.
And it can be as simple to engage this idea to help people that if they're curious about exploring that. I know your thoughts will come up, but when you drive from A to B, don't necessarily have I mean, I know I love learning. Okay. People always say, fill in that space with a podcast list. I don't want to stop people listening to your show, Michael, but, take a moment, a piece of the time. Now, here's an example that I will say to you when we talk about it, I guess towards the end, there's a lot of free things that I give people that are interested in my work. And one of the things I suggest to people is that, when you go in the car, say you've got a half-hour journey, take at least the first 10 minutes, no sound, just be with yourself. Okay. And I would say, if you're going home from work, to allow yourself to, shall we say, if it's been a difficult day, because there's always stuff to decompress, the last few minutes of the journey for sure be in silence again, so that you're kind of relaxed. Because if you even go from listening to a wonderful podcast, something that the minute you get out of the car, you're carrying that intensity inside, and you won't be so available for receptiveness, in the sense that if what happens is right away one of your children, grandchildren, or your spouse comes running to you, and you're like, your mind is still in a different space. So that silence allows you to make a transition.
I think a lot of people miss that. And I dare say that some of what you've talked about is affected by the fact that technology has advanced humans so far, but I still am not quite sure that humans have caught up to the technology with regards to capacity. We can take the information, we can hear all of the noise, if you will, but if we don't take that moment of silence and reset, all we've done is allowed for a run-on sentence to continue. And how do we discern what's right and what's real? It becomes real challenging.
That's another huge thing you just said, Michael. There's a lot of wisdom to what you said there, because I've heard I've heard a few people say something similar to you, that as humans, we're still running on old software.
Yeah.
No disrespect. I mean, I'm human. I'm part of the package here. But the whole story is that the technology is pulling us one way, and we just need to embrace it. And the analogy I use is, when we eat food, we need to take time to digest it. At times when we're learning, for me, I will grab books. I'll be really into a book. I might get halfway through, or I might finish that book, and I need to stop to digest what I learned. Because if I'm constantly, and this is one of the things that's in the little 10 tips guide that I'll mention that people can get, it's about being an eternal student, constantly on input. We cannot do this to ourselves, because things that we enjoy actually become a burden. An artist cannot be doing paintings nonstop 24 hours a day. Any artist that's listening may correct me, but I know that I write a lot, but I can't write constantly. I need to allow to resource myself by taking time. And I do this. For me personally, it's the rock climbing, it's the hiking, it's doing other things other than my work. And that actually really helps nourish myself. And I found that when if I allow myself to be pulled, and this is one thing that people are familiar with my work, is that I'm not very active on social media, because that is a pull on my time. And I believe that where can I invest my time most valuable? Do I want to spend time posting on a social network, or spend that time with my children? Because that passes, this is a personal choice. That time passes so very, very quickly. This could be, in relationship. Is this the best investment of my time? And how I look at that for those people listening is, I go to the future and I imagine 5-10 years from now, and you can apply this on physical well-being. If I'm still in the same physical state that I am right now, and I don't feel perfectly about how I am, what if I wait 5 years? Is this going to get better? Probably not. Is it going to get worse? Probably yes. So you go to the future, Michael, and for those people listening, and you imagine, okay, this is the worst thing that can happen, or this is what I don't want to be. Then you go back to this present moment in time, and you build a gentle but a intentional goal plan as to how to eliminate the challenges that you have. Because like in relationships, we can't have better relationships in our lives if we're in the same person that didn't have the relationship work out at this moment in time. Because it's not about, I need to find somebody that has this. It's, I need to grow so I can be the person that attracts the kind of person I want. So when I want to work on exercise and that, there's actions I need to take. But the key is here, as I go into simplification, is it's always to make sure that it's not something that's stressful. It's something that's joyful, something you really want to do. It's internally motivated, my friends. Like really, it's got to be something you want to do. And if you're not internally motivated, if it's external, you will burn off in time.
Yeah.
You're not going to continue. You have to find it from the inside. It's an inside job.
I really appreciate that whole happiness is an inside job. I mean, it's become a cliche, but it's insanely true. And I think the more that people would actually allow that inside job to occur through silence and through taking a moment to just, as we like to say, just chill.
Yes.
I think we would probably have a lot less stress. Life comes at us at a breakneck speed, right? And there's so many people that goes, my life runs at a series of 8 WTFs a minute. That's,
yes.
Well, it sounds like you need to slow down a little bit and maybe take a moment to just let those 8 WTFs take its own journey.
Yes.
Cool. Amazing stuff, my friend. We're going to take one more 30-second break, you guys. When we come back, we're gonna figure out where Dave's at, where you can find him, and what's next. Be back.
Okay.
Welcome back, Java Chat. Coffee with Mike. Dave and I have been having cool little breaks here in between, discussing things, talking a little bit more about the effect of what it is that guests that come here on Java Chat bring to the table, and the variety that we have, the different people that have been on the show. And Dave brings another wonderfully clear perspective to how you can approach life. Biggest one for me is the silence part, which I myself am guilty of not doing. And I think it's utterly huge for anybody who's listening. Go find that silence. Even if you got to walk out of your house for just a minute, 30 seconds, and just shut up. You know, I mean, and I don't mean your mouth, I mean your brain. Just go outside, just shut up. Dave mentioned it too. Thoughts are going to come up. In meditation, you learn, you know, there's no such thing as shutting off your brain, but there's a way to allow thoughts to come up and pass by without hanging on to them. Humans love to glom onto shit, and that's not healthy, especially if it's a negative thought. The idea is to bring it up, acknowledge it, allow it, be grateful, and let it pass. When you do that, you change your energy, you allow yourself to come back down to a good vibration. You're not over too high, and you're definitely not too low. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does to me.
Yeah, awesome. Where your practice right now is virtual, I'm assuming. You've got your own coaching
Most
program.
of my work is that way, and that's a choice thing.
Sure,
Because
absolutely.
yes, I mean, I live in a country where I am bilingual, but I know that obviously when English is my first language, I touch the hearts of people that are English speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So most of my work extends out from where I am.
Awesome.
So I'm not limited in that way, which is great. I like that. In my intention in my own life, I designed it that way. I always wanted to mean that, because I love traveling and I love learning from people. And if I designed and created a business, that would mean that I had to be stopped in one location, it wouldn't be the plan. So there was intention, as I mentioned on the last section, where do I want to be in the future? So I looked at that, and the pathway is not always simpler, but at least I'm going to where I want to go.
Yeah, that's a
so. Yes, so that's where I'm in the south of France, but that's kind of doesn't matter. I could be on the moon, could be on Mars.
Exactly. So you you have a website, obviously people can come.
Yes. It's the Make Things Simple, the wondertechnique.com. That's the name of my work, the wondertechnique.com, and people can find me online. And everything hangs from the Wonder Technique. On the website, people will find there's a blog where I've written lots of articles, and that's for people who like to read information. There's a link to my YouTube channel so people can see video or audio, depending, because sometimes I've done some little audio segments. There's also a membership course, which I'll talk a little bit about in a moment, which is attached to the site. And all the information comes from there. So they just need to look at one source. For those people who just joined the podcast now, you currently will not find me present on Facebook or Instagram and other sites. I do have a presence on LinkedIn, but I found that I'm trying to chase the algorithm, and this is not my game.
Yeah.
I'm all in for the human side, and I know enough about technology. I'm not an expert on technology, but I've studied these sort of things to understand that it's not working to the way I work on things, because my goal is long-term, very long-term, not the short-term grab a client kind of thing. And so I design my business, give people an option to find me through the Wonder Technique. I want to share with people before they exit to do something else, Michael, that when people join my readership, I also have a newsletter that's been going for 15 years or so, is that they get a number of items. Now, these are items I used to sell when I was doing workshops on that. And one of the ideas was inspired by my dad before he died, and I give them now away for free. So somebody becomes a reader. A lot of times you go to a website and they get a newsletter. Well, here, and I just added something new on Monday, which is, for example, the better decision-making checklist. So there's a list of 10 tips people can use to know when to make better decisions. Now, one of the things inside of that really quickly would be to know your chronotype. What time of day are you better able to make decisions? But there's a list there. There's also a better sleeping checklist. They get this for free. How to build your home environment, understanding the importance of temperature, light, and everything. And there's a whole bunch of items there. So it's a checklist. Literally, you can print it off, or you can look on your computer and say, okay, am I doing these things? Okay. Then there's the 10 steps to health and happiness. One of them is, for example, we talked a little bit about before, about not being an eternal student. Taking the time when you listen. If somebody decides after this podcast, Michael, I really liked that one thing that Michael said or David said, I would say stop, look at that idea, embrace it, bring it into your life, work on it, and see if it helps. And I will say to them, how to do that is not to put it into your phone, but get yourself an old-fashioned calendar or just a piece of paper, and do 5 times 6, 30, of course, some months are 31, but you do some boxes on it. Every day you take that action that you're trying to make a habit of, cross it off. We love those things. Like you cross it off, like, oh yes, I'm making the steps, I'm doing it. What I'm lifting more weights, whatever it is that you're trying to do, I'm eating something better. I'm actually listening in conversation with my spouse, those sort of things, do it for yourself, but this is your way of doing it. So there's the 10 tips. There's also a book of quotations. And then the thing that my dad inspired, people will not be able to see this unless they see video. But for example, these little mini cards. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, you can see it now.
Oh, that's cool.
Did I send this to you? I have to send you this stuff. I'll give you all of this.
Because that's cool. I like it.
For people to know, this little card says, I am peaceful in all I do. Now, this is the template they get for free. You print it off, you cut it up, I like to say positive litter, you can leave it on the bus, put it in your spouse's, purse or wallet, give it to your children at a lunchbox, it doesn't matter. You're sowing little seeds, and there's a little bit of reflection going here. I am peaceful in all I do. This is present tense, positive. So it's programming when you read it. You're working on overcoming the negative thoughts that you have. That's included. So there's more items. There's a poster that's positive quotations you can print and put up in your home. It's a whole package of things. And I'm apt to add more things. So that's that area there. And if people want to invest a little bit of money and support my work, currently the program that I have for mini courses, it's the equivalent of $10 a month, where people get unlimited access to what's currently 10 courses. And each one of those courses, for example, mentioned it before, how to improve your focus and concentration so you can achieve your goals is the title. There's a video, there's a whole bunch of audio, and there's a workbook. Different dimensions of learning. So a person could, if they want, they can sign up for 1 month. I don't mind. I'm pushing them, and they can do all 10 courses they want. But the idea is that resource is there. So it's a very small amount of money people can pay each month and go back to it when they feel they need a tune-up on that particular area of their life. So how to find your purpose, how to find and follow your purpose is another course that's in there. So you might decide that I'm going to take this little mini course, work through it, and then reassess in a year's time. Am I still really focused on what I want to do? So you go back and you test.
Yeah.
So that's also in the website. That's the mini courses that are there. And I don't make money a bridge to entry for people. I want to make sure that it's available, but there's a little cost that helps me support my work. Absolutely. Because I got expenses too.
Of course. You've built yourself a good business, my friend.
Thank you.
With everything that you've already accomplished, what do you think is your biggest challenge right now?
My biggest challenge came as a surprise in the last year, where I found out, Michael, that I really thought that people had more tools in the toolbox than I anticipated. I was really quite shocked when people I talked to that, for example, involved in health and wellness, literally collapsed during the period of the pandemic. They did not know how to manage the stress. They had great tools, but they were not part of their lives. And hence the reason why I've been honored to be on so many podcasts. And I've limited, based upon balancing my time, how many I've been on. I think so far there's maybe 50 I've done in the last year, but I only just started to put the door open, available, because somebody said, hey, maybe you should try this out. And when she invited me on her podcast, and thank you, Michelle, for that invitation, it started this happening. And my biggest challenge is I wouldn't say it's a challenge, it's just I realized how much more work there is to be done, because I'd rather be unemployed, in the sense that people don't need what I have to share. And I say that honestly out of humility, but I'm surprised that the fundamentals that some people say, yeah, I know of this, but they don't practice them. Because those core things, like we talk about silence, taking the time to really listen, literally taking the time to hydrate your body every day to the right amount. There's talk, but there's an interest, but there's not a commitment. And I think as human beings, when we really embrace something and dedicate ourselves, we make massive changes. And this will bring us as a planet to a level where we make clearer decisions, where things that were not clearly decided over the last year, we will understand when we're taking better, care of our minds that no, that's not a good quality decision. Changing decisions all the time, like for example, in the country where I'm living right now, where the decisions were, no, you're under confinement, no, you're not, we're changing this. Nobody really knew what was going on. Plus, they already had the stress of the experience. Plus, they were in confinement. People were getting more stressed. And in fact, I read that Santé Publique, the French health board, said that they had a 33% increase in people with depression and related illnesses. No surprise.
Yeah.
Because people, when you take people off center and you make things very complicated for them to manage things, it becomes harder. So my goal, Michael, is to continue till the day they put me in a box, if that's what it ends up being, is to sharing the principles of the W.O.N.D.E.R technique to help as many people as I can just get the core principles in place, because then they can build epic lives. But I believe we're held back when we don't have those things in place.
A wrench, a hammer, a screwdriver. Let's see, what else? Probably a screw gun.
Yeah.
Simple tools that you would normally need for just about any job.
Mm-hmm.
Core principles that you're sharing. If most people don't know how to use the tool, they'll leave it in the toolbox.
You're right.
And it sounds to me like you're trying to get them to understand these are your simple tools. This is what they do. Just use them. Is that a fair?
Yeah. And this is, you know what, I wouldn't recommend everybody to do what I'm doing, because most people don't want simple. They want complicated.
I don't understand that.
This, I've never got my mind around this one.
I couldn't figure that out.
This is what I've seen. I'm like, no, I'm actually looking for the simple approach. If you want complicated, I can't give it to you. So I want to make
if you
it
want
so
to make
that
it
it's easier.
complicated, you can make it as complicated as you want. After you figure out the basics,
Mm-hmm.
then you can go and get variated as much as you want. But if you're going to go variable right out the gate, you're no longer using the screwdriver with the flathead. Now you're trying to figure out what a star head looks like.
Yes.
For the mechanic heads.
I understand.
Yeah, it's like, why would you do that to yourself? It doesn't, to me, it doesn't make sense. And yet we're all guilty of it. Don't get me wrong, but I think the better part of living the simpler core principles, usually the difficult shit handles itself.
I agree. And it's clearer when things go astray, and they will go astray. The car will break down, the relationship will break down, something will break down. You might exercise and hurt yourself, but you'll understand better, because you'll go back to the core principles and say, okay, this is what I was doing.
It'll be a lot easier to figure it out. I think that's even in, again, going back to the entrepreneur side of things, when you have a business that's failed, and I've had my share,
Mm-hmm.
going back and just really looking at it and going, okay, everything was going fine until that's what happened. And you don't angst over it so long. You just kind of look at it and go, all right, well, we can't do that again, because obviously that doesn't work. But if you simplify it, like you said, when it's a simple core principle, when you're just looking at it, okay, what did I miss on the marketing? What did I miss on the operations? What did I miss on the fulfillment? That's what I missed in the marketing. That's what I missed on the sale. That's why they didn't buy. That's why it's really not that hard. And
an example of what you just said in business, I remember Jeff Bezos saying this. He said he wanted to design a business where there was the most amount of choice for people,
mm-hmm.
at the lowest price possible, and the fastest delivery. How simple can you get? And what did he end up building?
A bloody world network.
Exactly. And then you just look at what is the core principles. And when it talks to business, one of the things that I found when I talk to people in business and they say, and I go, hang on a second here, you're still working in marketing? Are you still in touch with your current clients that you have, or past clients? Oh no, we're looking for new clients. Your priority should be the people you're already in contact with. the people you know. If people are looking to meet people that could be wonderful relationships in the future, I would say people you already know are probably that pathway. Friends that know you and love you are more likely to introduce you to friends of theirs that you don't know that could be the ideal spouse or partner, whatever you want to say. So because go where you are, be where you are, and grow from there.
It's funny. I just got an email, I think yesterday, from one of the guys. I follow a lot of marketers, and I sit on their email lists just to see what they write. And somebody recently resurfaced, and the subject line was that 20 million is in your existing list. And I already knew what the email was going to say, and I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody has to go back and say this again. Come on, guys, it's not that hard. It's called referrals.
Yes.
People, like you said, people that know you and love you, they're going to shout from the rooftops if you ask them.
Exactly.
Well, guys, that brings us to the end of this fun time. I call this one a fun time because I got to learn, and I got to share, and I got to hang out with somebody again that's amazingly cool. Seriously, thank you for coming and sharing your insights and your expertise. It's been awesome.
It's been my honor, Michael, and thank you for everybody that's taking the time to listen to us.
And you guys know that, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, down there, I gotta remember I've mirrored the other way. Down there is a subscribe button, and there's a bell right next to it. Make sure you click on both of them so you know when we get more awesome guests like David joining us here on YouTube's Java Chat. Listening to us on any of the platforms for podcasting, download, subscribe, wherever you're at. I don't care what platform you're on. If you see anything where you loved it, please share a review. If you're listening to us on anchor.fm, that's our home plate. We can use a little support too here and there. Feel free to drop us some support on that platform. We always end these the same. We really are thankful for every one of you that stops in and makes the time and takes the time to listen. Hopefully you've gotten a ton of value out of this. So stay up, stay safe, stay healthy, and live. For myself, Coffee with Mike, and for Dave Hennessey. Ciao for now.
For more information on Java Chat, visit www.javachatpodcast.com. You've been listening to Coffee with Mike on Java Chat. Tune in weekly to this podcast for the next episode. You can also download or subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform. A production of Oasis Media Group, LLC. Located in Las Vegas, Nevada. Copyright 2019. All rights reserved.